little bit less support. You guys aren't really the best test subjects for this. I'm learning that over the course of the last couple of years. The point is for you to show the experiment, is for you to see the experimental setup. One reason for having helmet law is that research shown that when a motorcyclist has an accident, there's often a cost to taxpayers for paramedic services and emergency room treatment, and those costs may be considerably higher if a motorcyclist is not wearing a helmet. Helmet law can protect taxpayers from having to pay these costs. Okay? Does anybody know what economic market failure we are appealing to here as a justification for this policy? This is a consumption externality. You ride a motorcycle, it imposes a cost on the taxpayer. Okay? So what can we say? You guys, okay, so that's just a scale shift. So support went, this is interesting. So I think this is because I brainwashed you. Support went up when I gave you what I call sort of the behavioral economics justification. What you see in the news is that for a whole lot of people, particularly people who self-identify as conservatives, it appears anecdotally that the opposite is true, right? So you see someone like the senator from Mississippi, for whom framing this in terms of helping people overcome their own behavioral mistakes seem to undermine his support, which is problematic in light of the fact that these authors set out to come up with an approach to paternalism that would be attractive to conservatives. Okay? I'm now really fascinated by your answers, because this is actually a pretty strong result, and I'm going to now come up with a follow-up survey and ask you guys about this. Okay, so I actually have a record of who's in group 1 and who's in group 2. I might do a follow-up survey. Okay, now let's look at a specific application of this, coming out of what we did last time. Yes, Alex. Well, actually, yeah, let me not rush on. Let me pause this. Yeah. So here's, okay, yeah, sorry, I'm rushing on inappropriately. So my hypothesis is that, I'll get to you in a second. My hypothesis is that, let me back up. The way I dissect this paper and the next paper I'm going to show you is that there's an implicit political psychology hypothesis that says if you have a policy that is justified by the mistakes hypothesis and can be shown to have huge asymmetric benefits, overall, rational and irrational types combined, that conservatives should be more willing to support it than compared to some other paternalism hypothesis. Now, the thing that I observe is that virtually all of these policies that folks refer to as examples of this kind of paternalism can also be justified on the basis of perfectly ordinary classical market failure. Right? In this case, there's a substantial negative externality, and not just for taxpayers, but for friends and relatives of motorcycle riders as well. And my hypothesis, which I have not yet tested other than on you guys, and I'm clearly my hypothesis fails, is that they're wrong, is that they're actually backwards. That the truth is that conservatives will actually be more moved by an externality story than by a help other people overcome their own mistakes story. So this is a framing experiment in political psychology terms, where I sort of prime specific frame for the justification of the policy and see what happens. Yeah. That's right. You guys are all in the 47% of people who would never vote for Mitt Romney because you don't pay any taxes. And you all don't ride motorcycles and probably have spent enough time listening to me bitching and moaning about my teeth that you think I deserve a law to, poor Professor Ackland, he's such a moron. Yes, I want to vote for a helmet law to protect him from his own foolishness. Yeah. Right, but it's still mostly support. But the balance went against my hypothesis. I think what I need to do is to give you guys, the next time I teach the course, is to do this at the beginning of the semester before I've indoctrinated you. People usually do this kind of 4-point scale and then just cut it into 2 halves. You're asking me questions about political science methodology that I don't know the answer to. Right? Economists like to colonize other fields of social science, so this is me trying to do that. Hang on a second, there was another question down here, I think? Yeah. Yeah, it's a sort of a sympathy vote. So in other words, I actually larded up the framing outside of this. I added a ton of extra framing. That's actually a really interesting point. Yeah, next time I'll pipe down about that. Real quick. That's also a good point. Yeah, that's actually a comment I got from political scientists. Okay, and I have a bunch of other. I've got a draft of the same set of questions for the soda ban and a few others. Okay, now let's go back to the cigarette tax, which is actually quite similar to the soda ban. How many of you voted in the recent elections? So you know that I'm not going to ask you. I voted. I think that's probably against the law. But there was this thing, right, about a soda tax, which is very similar to a soda ban, and the benefit cost analysis on it is going to be based on similar factors. So here we are going back to our cigarette tax, right? And we have this idea that we can model people's true preferences, which is to say the preferences of rational types, smokers who do not have self-control problems, and then the sort of demand of behavioral types, which is the actual expressed willingness to pay of smokers who do have self-control problems. Okay? And the difference between the two, as we said last time, we could think of as the marginal internal cost, or internality cost, not internal, but internality cost. So here's how we would apply benefit cost analysis to this in terms of asymmetric paternalism. Right? What we want to know is what's the benefit to the irrational types, what's the cost to the rational types. Now, it makes some very strong assumptions about the shape of the demand curve and the shape of the marginal cost, namely that the demand curve is linear and the marginal cost is constant. And that's going to make the analysis overly simplistic, but I think you'll get the point. So let's just establish some of the little parts of the process here that I've taught you, well, that lots of people have taught you. I'm going to call that Q1 because it's actually going to serve several functions. Q1 is, what does Q1 represent? It's the optimal quantity according to people's true preferences, right? So that is Q opt. What else is it? Where else would we find this in our analysis of smoking market, cigarette market? I'm postulating a market in which there are rational types and irrational types, beta discounters and delta discounters. Okay? So this demand curve, D rat, now actually represents the actual expressed willingness to pay of the rational types, right? Because there's no internality for them. So this is also the market equilibrium for the rational types. I'm going to call that Q market rat. Okay? Over here, meanwhile, I'm going to call this Q2. That obviously, we know already, is the market equilibrium for behavioral types. Yeah? Okay, so what do? We come along and we say we're going to impose a policy that we hope will be asymmetrically paternalistic. So we start with the mistakes hypothesis. We say we're going to correct for the self-control internality by imposing a tax equal to 1 minus beta times c. So I'm going to model the tax differently than I usually do because it'll simplify the diagram. I'm just going to say people are now going to be paying a price that is the actual price of the cigarettes plus the tax. And what is this going to do? it's going to shift the actual market equilibriums, right? So it's going to move the behavioral types from here to here. So Q1 now also is I'm going to call this QT, the quantity smoked after taxes for the behavioral types. So we're moving the behavioral types to the optimal outcome. However, somewhat problematically, we're moving the rational types away from optimality to a point I'll call Q3. That is the, sorry, I wrote that wrong, sorry. That's supposed to be Q market. So this is going to be QT for the rational types, okay? So the tax has moved behavioral types to the socially optimal level, or the individually optimal level, and it's moved the rational types to a level of underconsumption, right? Which is what we usually expect from a tax in the case of rationality. Good? Clear? We've done steps, I think, 1 through 4 of the analysis. Okay, so these are the suboptimal units for the behavioral types, okay? Those are units that were suboptimal before the tax, and now they've been taxed out of the market, and as we saw last time, that is going to reduce the harm smokers do to themselves by this much, okay? So I'm going to call that A, and it's equal to net reduced harm per smoker, per irrational smoker, net reduced harm. And then, as with any tax analysis we might want to do for the rational types, there is some deadweight loss, which I will call B, area B, all right? If we want to do benefit cost analysis, there's one more piece of information we need, which is what? Well, let me ask you this question. Is this policy of imposing this tax to correct the internality cost of the irrational types benefit to society on net, or does it pass benefit cost analysis or not? You need to know the proportion of types, right? So the way that I've modeled this with linear demand and constant marginal internality cost, A and B are of equal size. That's not necessarily going to be the case in reality, but it's in the simplified model I've got. It is. So by chance, by assumption, by construction, A equals B. So the net benefits of this policy are going to be equal to, let's add some notation, N RAT, which it's just going to be sort of the number, or it could be a proportion of rational types, times, what do they get? They lose, sorry, which way around do I want to do this? Yeah, I want to start with behavioral types. Okay, so the number of behavioral types times A, that's the benefit to society, the total benefit to society, minus the number of rational types in the market times B, okay? Which is positive if N behavioral is greater than N RAT, right? Okay. So do you see how this is sliding towards the asymmetric, the minimal harm hypothesis? If we could now go and get some estimate of the proportion of rational and non-rational types in smoking markets, then we could get a handle on how asymmetric this policy is. The policy passes benefit cost analysis, provided that at least half of smokers are irrational beta discounters. Okay? But that's not what the asymmetric paternalist standard requires. The asymmetric paternalist standard requires that basically the cost-benefit analysis be asymmetric, that it be overwhelmingly positive. That basically there be very little harm to behavioral types, which could be because there's very little harm for rational type, per rational type, or it could be because there's not very many rational types. Now, if you go and look, I wish I actually had some numbers, but if you go and survey smokers, where was my smoker? He's not here today. It was this extremely honest and self-revealing smoker. If you go and survey smokers, the vast majority of them will tell you, I really would prefer not to smoke, or I really would prefer to smoke a lot less. I actually think most smokers would prefer to smoke a few cigarettes a day and not enough to kill themselves. I personally would prefer to smoke, like a bowl of pipe tobacco once a week, and I know I can't do it. What? No, come on. Come on. I'm too old for that. Too stupid. Okay, no, my own preference would be to smoke a little bit of pipe tobacco. My experience with the one time I actually went and bought a pipe and sat down at Schmidt's Pub with a packet of Cavendish was that I smoked 5 bowls in a row and almost passed out. So I can't do that. The point is that the vast majority of smokers will say, no, I'm not rational, I wish I could stop. And it's not that hard to conclude that this tax would satisfy asymmetric paternalism. Yeah? Does everyone buy that? Anybody want to disagree with me? It's fine if you disagree with me. I mean, I'm not in charge of anything, except the mic. Okay. So what if we make the tax smaller? Suppose that we were to say, let's just tax some of the internality away. Right? In that case, what we get is we get, sorry, let me do it this way. This would be the deadweight loss to the rational types, and this would be the net harm reduction to the behavioral types. And now we have a situation where we're doing relatively little harm to each rational type, and this thing is going to be a net positive benefit cost analysis unless the proportion of rational types is ridiculously and unbelievably large. Yeah? My point in walking you through this sort of simplistic pair of diagrams is twofold. The first is to show you that, again, as I've emphasized a number of times, we are reasonably well equipped with actual real-world policy analysis tools to do quantitative analysis on whether or not this kind of policy would be a good thing for society or not, in exactly the same way that we are equipped to do this kind of quantitative analysis under assumptions of rationality. This is just benefit cost analysis, and this approach to estimating the parameters of a benefit cost analysis is not that much more loosey-goosey than the kind of benefit cost analysis I teach my graduate students across the street at the School of Public Policy. So this kind of application of neoclassical economic normative analysis to a public policy area where we think that behavioral economics has something to say about people's preferences is actually quite valid and entirely doable in the real world, and indeed people are doing it in the real world. The second reason I drag you through this exercise is because I want you to see that the definition of soft paternalism, this asymmetric paternalism definition in the Kammerer et al. Paper, the Regulation for Conservatives, is a very rigorous one, right? It imposes a standard that has been accepted and recognized by neoclassical economists for 100 years or more. And it does so, as I say, in a way that can be applied with mathematical rigor. And the reason that matters to me is because I'm now going to go into a pet peeve. No, not quite, later. Okay, another example. All right, so insurance premium penalties or discounts for being obese or non-obese, which is to say for, sort of these are taxes or subsidies in some sense for your eating and exercise behaviors. Okay, So we think that there's an internality. We talked about this endlessly. Two ways to overcome an internality. One, tax. I should put this in quotes because there are all kinds of ways to raise the price of something that you want people to do less of, and we typically refer to them as taxes, but they may not actually be technically taxes. So many insurance companies have a premium surcharge. They increase the insurance premium. This is health insurance for obese people. Okay? So that's essentially a tax on irrational food and exercise choices. Okay? Does that make sense? This is a matter of public policy. The Affordable Care Act increases the maximum surcharge allowed. I think that the very fact that you're allowed to impose a surcharge is something that the government regulates. This, by the way, is the same president who appointed Cass Sunstein as the head of OIRA. That comment will make more sense when we start talking about libertarian paternalism, because Cass Sunstein is one of the authors of the paper Libertarian Paternalism. The point is that Cass Sunstein, who's actually a lawyer, is one of the big names in the policy domain of behavioral economics and public policy. He's an advisor to numerous government agencies. He ran OIRA, which is the government agency responsible for overseeing benefit cost analysis throughout the executive branch of the federal government. So the point is that Obama is one of the, like David Cameron in England, one of the people who's starting to take behavioral economics seriously. So one of his signature policies says, yes, you can go and do this sort of behavioral economic thing and penalize people for being obese, making irrational food and exercise choices, and that should potentially correct for an internality, and that'll be thumbs up for society as a whole. Conversely, you can give people a subsidy for the same exact thing, right? So many employers have wellness plans, right? So university gives me a healthcare benefit. And in addition, every year, they send out this series of emails about their wellness plan, which says, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, healthy stuff, we'll give you $100 or something like that, or a basket of flowers or something like that. Some of these wellness plans include an insurance premium discount. We will reduce the employee contribution to your health insurance premium if you overcome an existing obesity problem. Okay? So this isn't a reduction in price for people who happen to not be obese. This is a reduction in price for people who, because if you're an employer, right, you're tracking this person over time. You say, look, this was this person's body mass index at one point in time, and they've overcome that, so we're going to give them a discount on their premium. So that's a subsidy for rational food and exercise choices. Okay? Again, this is a matter of public policy. HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, is what allows firms to provide these discounts. And the rule, right, so HIPAA gets updated from time to time, was established under George W. Bush. Are you surprised? So the point is that this idea of nudging people towards better health outcomes to help them overcome their mistakes is actually one that has gained traction under a variety of different political regimes. Okay. Now let me ask you this, just to test your understanding of this basic concept of asymmetric paternalism. Which of these two policies, the implicit tax or the implicit subsidy, satisfies the criteria of asymmetric paternalism? That is, corrects a mistake, does minimal harm. Okay? The tax and subsidy, both neither, or no answer. Okay, so take another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. You guys have to save yourself. All right, we have a pretty evenly split mix. Who feels that? So somebody who answered either A or C. In what sense does the tax satisfy asymmetric paternalism? A or C? Yeah. So basically, what you're saying is sort of. I think the way I'm going to interpret what you said is that the tax is only going to affect people who've made unhealthy choices. Implicit in your statement is the assumption that those people have made mistakes according to their own true preferences based on some irrationality, right? Kind of like what I was saying about the soda ban. And that people, rational types who are presumably have made healthy choices for themselves because they realize the long-term effects, not going to be affected by this. What is the, remind me of your name? Henry, for the millionth time. I'm sorry, Henry. That's probably because of the number of head injuries I've sustained. You've only heard the tip of the iceberg. What assumption is Henry making? Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, that the tax will work, right? Because if the tax doesn't work, you're basically just extracting money from irrational types. Yeah, that's a good point. We went into the whole thing of like, does the amount of harm that I reduce with this tax, is it greater or less than the amount of the tax, right? And that depends a lot on the elasticity of demand, which is to say how effective the tax is in changing your behavior. That's absolutely right. There's another assumption in this, though. Henry's made a fairly strong statement about why people are obese. Or that if you have wound up, so Timothy said that obesity is irrational, or rather the behavioral choices that lead to obesity are irrational. And maybe there are some people who rationally, for whom it's like, hey, there's not that much cost to me. I mean, I was at a wedding last weekend and all my English relatives came and did this. Dan, what's happened? They wanted to touch my beard. I swear it was like going to like a primitive society. Because I've gained about 20 pounds since the last time they saw me. And I look at that and I'm like, what's it cost to me? I've got a girlfriend. She doesn't seem to care. So maybe I'm rationally overweight, right? So we don't actually know. We're making, there's an assumption there. So it's possible. And by the way, there are some people who for genetic reasons or medical reasons can't lose weight. So that would also be a case where you'd be punishing sort of rational types or people who are not, where the mistakes hypothesis doesn't apply. So again, it depends a little bit on what's actually true, and we tend to sort of make assumptions about what's true that are either right or wrong. What about the subsidy? How about somebody who said A rather than C, who thinks that the subsidy does not satisfy asymmetric paternalism? Okay, someone who thinks it does. Thinks that